What's up, everybody? I saw this photo and the header, the mysterious prehistoric underwater structure beneath Lake Michigan, and I was seriously waiting for the punchline. But it's not a joke. They really found this at the bottom of Lake Michigan. And I bet there were some heads spinning about how they're going to explain this one, so I'm going to read the article and we'll talk about it a bit. So, this is up at the north end of Lake Michigan in this snake tongue looking bay here called Traverse Bay. That's about 11 miles wide at its widest point. And check this place out. These are some of the little bays that are coming off of that forked tongue. But these are pretty crazy. I didn't know these existed up there. You probably don't see it quite so dramatic at ground level. They spend about 6 paragraphs talking about anything but what's going on here. Then finally, about 40 feet beneath Lake Michigan, Dr. Holly discovers stones arranged in a long line over 1 mile in length. Now, there are multiple structures that were found, so I'm not sure if the one in the photo is the one that they're talking about here. They're not very clear about anything other than it's there. Then they say the stones have been dated to approximately 9,000 years ago, which is 4,000 years before Stonehenge and 2,000 years after the Ice Age. So they have to go with this 9,000 year story to make it fit into their timeline, and everything's always happening over millions of years. But then they just start downplaying it. He says the site seems to gain life in media about every 6 months or so, but sadly, much of the information out there is incorrect. For example, there's not a henge associated with the site because the stones are relatively small when compared to what most people think of as European standing stones. So he's downplaying these because they're not huge. Well, I mean, this is right along with Nabta Playa and the Spanish Stonehenge that came out of the water during a drought a while back, only this is 40 feet under Lake Michigan. And because of it being that far down and how old they're saying it has to be, well, then they have to play the hunter-gatherer game. Especially because this is back in the time of mastodons. Which, yeah, there were still Native American tribes that hunted wild game a couple hundred years ago, and then there were also settled, like the Cherokee, were more of town folk. Plus, don't forget the Mississippian culture that had these huge mounds that they built, which natives say was built by giants. And then they double down and say should be clearly understood that this is not a megalithic site. Yes, but it was built by intelligent thinking human beings that did this for a reason. So then they changed the subject for a minute, and we'll get back over to here, but they say that John O'Shea, University of Michigan, had been working on a similar structure over in Lake Huron. Okay, so now you're telling me that there's man-made structures all over the Great Lakes, all right? Oh, but they're not that big. Don't worry about it. Yeah, they're worried about losing their jobs. Over in Lake Huron, they say the main feature, known as Drop 45 Lane, is the most complex hunting structure ever discovered beneath the Great Lakes to date. So now you're telling me that there are multiples of these structures, this one being more complex than the others. The structure consists of 2 parallel lines of stones that lead to a cul-de-sac, lined with natural cobblestones. So a keyhole shape. Wow, it is located 37 meters underwater. That's 100 feet. That's a huge difference in the landscape if it's 100 feet or less water. This locality, comprising only 8 hectares, they're downplaying it more, has an unusual high density of confirmed hunting features, including at least 4 V-shaped hunting blinds and a rectangular construction that, following ethnographic parallels, may represent a meat cache. The stone lane is 8 meters wide and 30 meters long, and it has 3 associated circular hunting blinds that are built into the stone lines and a series of perpendicular flanking lines on its west side. The interior of this lane is covered with clean sand to a depth of approximately 6 centimeters. So how is it we got a stone slab that was obviously on flat ground, and they built up stone walls on each side of it, and it's now under the Great Lakes with only 6 centimeters of sand over it, but other sites on dry land are buried in 40 feet of mud. They've started scrubbing this from the internet, by the way. But seriously, with this having such a light layer of residue on it, I would think that the water's coming up gradually. You look at the video I did on the woolly mammoths that are all just tangled up in a big ball of muck. They got hit with a solid wall of tsunami mud. But if that happened here, then we'd never even know that this existed. If you're new to my channel and haven't watched the videos about the Earth catastrophe cycle, you should probably watch some of those, especially the 14th century one. Because, well, the world got wiped out about 700 years ago, and they tell us it was just the Black D, but like 2/3 of the population was gone. So, why are there no megalithic structures in North America? And I know about the Montana dolmens, which are questionable whether or not those are man made or not. But every other landmass in the world, you have unquestionably man made megaliths. Even on a tiny island 1,000 miles off the coast of Australia, you have Nan Madol, which is unquestionably a man made city. I even asked this to a buddy of mine who's not too big into the catastrophism theory. And even he said, well, they must have got wiped out because that's the most logical answer. So these are all basins where large amounts of sedimentary material can be found, which is pretty much all of North America. I mean, even the flat spots up in the Rockies are covered up. This is what the pyramids at Teotihuacan look like just in the early 1900s. They were completely buried under a layer 10 foot thick. And for the people that still haven't figured out how they used to dig footings and whatnot, a shovel worked as good 100 years ago as 2,000 years ago. And they've dug out all the pyramids in Mexico, Guatemala, all Central America. And I don't buy the story of these gradual cultural layers happening here. This is out in the desert, at least with our modern climatic conditions. But I was out walking ruckus down by the river the other day, and there's this old 1800s footing for a house, and the chimney's still there, and it's in pretty thick woods on the bottom side of a hill where erosion would carry any mud down to it, and it's still a usable chimney. And I'm guessing it still will be in another 200 years and 200 years after that, because things don't get buried under 10 foot of debris for no reason. But all of the ancient structures of Central America were. The world's largest pyramid at Cholula is still almost completely buried, and they put a Catholic church at the top of it, pretty much guaranteeing it will never be excavated. And I theorize that a giant wave went over pretty much all of North America, burying everything from the ancient past, and it wasn't quite so bad down in Mexico and Central America. And if that's the case, then this was built after the pyramids at Teotihuacan, and the Great Lakes formed after that was built. Otherwise, all of this would be buried in muck as well. With the woolly mammoths, back to that, I don't think they've been extinct for tens of thousands of years, whatever they say. I think it's been more like hundreds. Thomas Jefferson was a huge fossil-phile, if that's a word. When he sent Lewis and Clark on their expedition, he gave them orders to capture a woolly mammoth if they came across one. But the way all of these ancient creatures have been found, they got wiped out in a huge cataclysm of some sort. They'll even find bone stuck into other bone because it hit with such force. And a lot of times you find like thousands of them all at one spot, like La Brea tar pits. But in the survey of Lakaw Islands on the northeastern coast of Siberia, it is written that the first of these islands is little more than one mass of these bones. And although the Siberian traders have been in the habit of bringing over large cargoes of them, tusks, for upward of 60 years, there appears to be no sensible diminution. Just a whole island of ivory. In another area, they were digging a ditch to drain a lake, and they said at a depth of about 30 feet below the margin of the lake were found the fossil bones. The first animal discovered was very near perfect, with the exception of the head, and at a small distance, another skeleton was found of smaller dimensions. The drain was only 12 feet wide, but we may conjecture that had the trenches been wider, more remains would have been found. May not herds of these creatures have been destroyed whilst feeding on what at the time was an extended plain? I'm inclined to to this opinion from having found fossil branches of trees in the same trench with the animals. Anyway, we have official man-made structures 40 feet, even 100 feet under Lake Michigan and Lake Huron. And I'm sure in 2 weeks on the internet, this will be an acoustic energy generation power station, because that's how the internet works. People can't just be happy with the fact that the Great Lakes are a lot newer than we've been told, and people used to live down here where it's underwater, which is a huge discovery, and definitely something I'm going to ponder a little further. So I hope you guys enjoyed it. It's a pretty cool find. Static out.